Hi everyone, it's Erin from the Provincial Farmhouse. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how you can create some easy fall pumpkins. For my first pumpkin, I'm going to be using this calico type fabric that I thrifted for just $1, and I am using my craft iron to iron out the creases, and then I'm just going to freehand draw a large circle. If you're not confident freehanding a large circle like this, you could use some sort of a printable to help you do that, or you could trace around a wood round. But again, it doesn't really need to be perfect. I'm then going to take out my scissors and I'm going to cut out the circle shape that I created. The pumpkins I'm going to create today are very basic. Anyone really can do them. If you want to do it a little bit more complicated or use a sewing machine, there are lots of free pumpkin patterns online. Next, I'm going to take out IOD's Ephemeral type stamp. This is from their most recent release. And I'm not going to be removing the stamps from the stamp backing. I'm going to keep it like that. I like the configuration. I'm just going to be taking out IOD's permanent black ink, and I'm going to be adding ink to the entire design. I am going to be stamping onto fabric, so I am using a bit more ink than I would usually. I'm then going to be flipping that stamp over, positioning it in the center, and then pressing down. I'm then going to move pressure around over the top of the stamp, but I always have one hand holding it in place, making sure that it's not going to shift, and then I will lift it straight up. Now I had a few gaps around the edges, so I'm just going to select a couple of stamps randomly, and I'm going to position those in the gaps. Ultimately, what I'm trying to create here is a French script sort of style fabric that I can use for my pumpkins. Now, if you already have fabric like this in your stash, that's great. You could use those. However, if you don't, this is a great way that you can create your own, and you don't necessarily have to just use this for pumpkins. This would be great for a pillow. Certainly would be great to customize and create your own pillow. But overall, I just really wanted it to have a bit more of sort of like a French feel, and I thought, why not create my own fabric? So I'm just going to continue to randomly add the stamps around in those gaps. If this was going to go on a cushion, I would recommend that you heat set with an iron and you make sure that you don't wash it for several weeks. But this is just going to be a decor piece, so I'm not worried about that. I let my ink dry for about half an hour, then I flipped over the fabric, and now I'm just going to be using just a simple needle and white thread. I'm going to tie a knot in one end, and I've already threaded through the white cotton, and I am going to start gathering that fabric together, and I'm going to start just running a stitch through that. So there's not really a wrong way to do this, because ultimately what I'm trying to do is just gather that fabric up all in the center, and you won't even be able to actually see all of those stitches anyway because of the other things that are going to go over the top. So however you decide to do this, we're just gathering that fabric all together, and you can see I'm sort of folding the fabric over, gathering it together, and then pushing that needle and thread through there and then pulling it tight. And I'm going to work my way around the circle and continue those steps until I have all of that fabric gathered and we have a pumpkin sort of a shape. Now, I am not a sewer by any means. I obviously know how to sew on a button and do a couple of stitches to fix up any tears in my clothing, but other than that, I am very basic. So if I can do it, you can definitely do it. This is just a very basic stitch. I'm not even sure what it's called, sorry, but basically we've gathered it all together. I've got that cotton thread all the way around it. We've got it all ready to go, and then once I finished doing that, I'm not going to tie it off yet because I want to be able to come in and start adding some hobby fill. I don't go and buy the hobby fill from craft stores. I go and buy a brand new pillow and I use the stuffing from that. It's a lot more affordable, and it's just basically the same thing but with a cheaper price tag. So I'm just going to continue to add that stuffing into the pumpkin until it is as big as I want. And then once I'm happy with the shape of that, I'm going to take my needle and thread and I'm going to carefully start pulling that. Now, be gentle with this. I had my thread break once, so I had to sort of tie it on so that it didn't all come apart. So definitely go a bit slower. Maybe use a thicker thread than I am. I do end up doubling over my thread on the other two pumpkins I did. So I'm going to pull it really tight and then I'm going to start making some more little sort of knots. I'm going to start pulling those sides together and then tying simple knots to keep it in place. So I'm threading it all and then I'll do a couple of knots and then I will cut off the excess of that thread. I then grabbed some twine and I'm going to start pulling that around the edges of the pumpkin to make those little indents to get that pumpkin shape happening. I just kept one thread there and I just sort of pulled it around the pumpkin shape in whatever configuration I felt looked right, and then now I'm just tying it off in the center. For the center stalk part of the pumpkin, I'm using this curtain rod end that I thrifted for 50 cents. It was in a pack of 2. And I'm also going to use this vintage style lace. I'm going to apply some hot glue around the top part of the pumpkin. And then I'm going to start pressing that lovely lace into the hot glue, being careful not to burn myself, obviously. And I'm sort of gathering it up so that we can get it in a round shape, just adding the hot glue here and there. I did use the end of my scissors to press it down so I didn't burn myself. Definitely be careful with this. It's very easy to burn yourself. And I'm just going to continue to work my way around the top part of that pumpkin, gathering up that lace, gluing it down, and continue that until I have it all the way back around to meet where we started. Once I have my little circle of lace complete, I'm going to trim off the excess. I then took another piece of ribbon and I'm just going to add that on the inside part just to sort of hide the untidy edge of the lace that we added. Once I have that over the top of the edge of the lace, I'm going to cut off the excess. I then decided that I wanted to add this chiffon ribbon to the top, so I'm just cutting off the length that I want. Then I'm going to be creating 2 loops about the same size and then tying them in a knot. So I'm going to be putting this in the center part of the pumpkin. And I'm just making sure that it's going to go well with the stalk that we're adding. And then I'm going to apply some glue to glue the chiffon ribbon in place. And I did think about adding these little pearls to my little stalk thing there, but in the end I took that off. And here's a look at our first finished pumpkin. I'm really pleased with how this one turned out. It definitely has a little bit of a shabby chic feel to it. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. For my second pumpkin, I'm going to be using this white cotton fabric that I thrifted, and I'm just going to freehand cut out a large circle. I didn't bother sketching it out this time, and I'm just going to cut that out and just get it to the approximate size that I want. I then used my craft iron to get out as many wrinkles as I could. I'm then going to be using IOD's Veranda Stamp. This is the second page of the stamp that has the roses, and I'm going to pull off one of those designs, and I'm using IOD's China Blue Ink. Now, when I first inked up my stamp design, I didn't realize that I needed to refill my ink pad. So this first image that I have stamped down, it didn't come out as dark as I wanted. So I did end up going back and adding more ink to my ink pad. And from there, I was definitely more happy with the color and the image quality as I was stamping. So I'm just going to continue to work my way around adding this stamp design. I'm leaving a gap in between because there is another rose design, but it's sort of going the opposite way and it's a little bit different. So I'm going to be adding that now in the gaps that I have left. So I'm inking it up with my China Blue ink. and I'm going to be adding that into the gaps, just working my way around. I really love these stamps. It definitely was reminding me of a rose toile. It felt quite French country. It was definitely a really fun look that I think I'll be repeating again, and the stamps and the ink did so well on this fabric. So I'm just going to continue to add that stamp in between, and then I switched to one of these smaller rose designs just to fill in some of the other gaps around the in between each of the larger roses. I went with blue for my ink this time, but there are other ink colors that you could choose from if perhaps blue wasn't to your taste. Once I finished adding the smaller rose design in those gaps, I inked up the same stamp that we started with, and I decided to go over the top of the one that turned out a bit fainter, and I was very happy that I was able to fix that up. Now in this case, I did decide to use my hairdryer to heat set that ink. The fabric was a little bit thinner, and I didn't want there to be any smearing of that beautiful China blue ink while I was creating my pumpkin shape. I then took out my needle and thread, and just like we did with the first pumpkin, I am threading that cotton through my fabric there, and I'm gathering it up until I have it all gathered up in the center in that pumpkin shape. Once I had the fabric gathered, I made sure I still left a gap so that we could put the stuffing in, and I'm going to keep adding the stuffing until I'm happy with the shape. Once I was happy with the shape, I started to pull that thread just like we did with the first one, pulling those sides together. And then I'm going to go in and start adding some more stitches to bring that center together, and then I will tie a few knots to hold everything in place. I then pulled out this white lace that I had in my stash, and I'm going to create 2 loops, and then I'm going to tie a knot so that I can create a bow. And then I'm going to trim off the excess lace that I don't need. And I'm going to be positioning this in the center part of the pumpkin. I'm really loving the combination of the lace with the rose toile design that we're able to create. Before gluing it in place, I took this little stalk from a pumpkin that I recently crafted. I'm just going to borrow that until I can order some more in. I've pushed it through the lace, and now I'm just going to simply push it into the center of the pumpkin. And here's a look at our rose toile pumpkin. I love how this turned out. It feels very French country, and it's definitely something that I would have in my decor. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. For my final pumpkin, I'm going to be using some drop cloth and this doily that I thrifted. So I'm just laying it down so that as I'm going around and sort of free cutting out a circle, I can make sure that I'm going to have enough of that drop cloth fabric for the doily to sit on top. I'm then going to use my craft iron to iron out as many of those wrinkles as I can. I'm not going to be doing any stamping with this one today because we are going to be using that doily, but I do just want to get most of those harsh wrinkles out. I'm then going to take out my needle and thread, and just like I did before, I'm gathering that fabric up and pulling my thread through those. I did speed this up because obviously it's quite repetitive. It's just the same as what I did with the first 2 pumpkins. And then I came in and started adding some of that stuffing into the center until I was happy with how full that was. And then once I'm happy with that, I am going to pull that thread tight and then start tying some knots to hold it in place. I then added some hot glue to the top section where my doily is going to sit. You could always sew this into place. I just went with this so that if I want, I can very easily take it off in the future. just pressing it down with the scissors so that I don't burn myself. And then I took out some twine and I'm going to start wrapping that around the pumpkin so we can give it more of a pumpkin shape. And I'm using the shape of the doily as a guide as to where I'm going to put my twine. And I'm just sort of winding it around several times. So I am using quite a long bit of twine for this. And then once I have all of those sections done, I'm going to cut off that twine and then tie it in a knot to hold it in place. I then decided to add a few little dabs of hot glue at the very ends of where the doily meets the pumpkin there, just so that we can hold those in place. Again, needle and thread, you could definitely do it that way. This was just the easiest way for me to do this, and I may want to use this doily for something else in the future. I then took out some brown florist wire that I had in my stash, and I'm going to wind it around this Sharpie that I had. It was about the right size because I'm going to be creating the look of the pumpkin vines, and I'm just going to add that curl to each end of the florist wire. I went with brown. I really quite like that lovely contrast with the whites that we've been using. So I'm just going to wrap that around that other end, and then once I'm happy with that, I did sort of stretch it just a little bit further out. And then I'm going to bend it, and I'm going to wrap it around another one of those plastic stalks from some other pumpkins that I did. We're going to borrow that today. I'm going to wrap it around so that it's secured in place, and then I'm going to simply push it into the small gap that I have up the top in the doily and the pumpkin, and that will be able to stay in place pretty easily. And here's our finished doily pumpkin. I really like how this turned out. It definitely has a shabby chic feel, quite a bit vintage. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. I really hope that you enjoyed today's video and that it's shown you how easy it can be to create some beautiful fall pumpkins for your home. Let me know if you had a favorite project from today. If you enjoyed today's video, I would love it if you would hit that like button, comment, and share it out. If you haven't already, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of our videos. You can find the IOD products used in today's video on our website, theprovincialfarmhouse.com.au. Thanks for watching.